Canada's unemployment rate actually fell in January, but as always, there's more to the story because we lost 25,000 jobs. Employment fell, Canada's employment level fell. Ontario lost 67,000 jobs. Private sector hiring rolled over, and yet somehow unemployment went down. Why did this happen? It's not because we're recovering, it's because people are quietly leaving the labor force, both young people and the population growth reversal that we've seen from Canadian government policy. So here's the entire January jobs report in 1 minute. Employment fell by 25,000 jobs. The employment rate dropped to 60.8%. Ontario took the biggest hit in the country with 67,000 jobs. The unemployment rate fell to 6.5%, not because hiring surged, but because people are giving up or they're leaving. Fewer people are even looking for work. Private sector employment is shrinking. Public sector and government adjacent activity is holding things together. Manufacturing is losing jobs. Education and public administration are losing jobs. Infrastructure-linked government-funded sectors are still growing, and we probably knew this was going to happen with the whole Build Canada thing, where the Carney government said they're going to spend a lot more money on CapEx and a lot less money on OpEx. But here's the key takeaway. This report is telling us that the labor market is weakening, even if the headline unemployment rate looks better. And there's one massive force missing from this conversation entirely, which is artificial intelligence, which was recently highlighted in a Bank of Canada report. Let's get into the data. And speaking of data, if you like calm, data-driven breakdowns like this, hit the subscribe button. This channel is about understanding actually what's happening with no spin or bias. So the Statistics Canada Labor Force Survey January 2026 headline says that employment fell by 25,000 jobs in January. Where it looked like we were making some gains back, it appears the momentum is turning. And the only reason we're really seeing unemployment falling is because people are leaving Canada. A lot of temporary foreign workers whose visas are expiring, and we're now seeing the Canadian population shrinking at the fastest rate it ever has. The employment rate dropped to 60.8%. This is the first decline in the employment rate, or total employment level, which is the number of jobs divided by the number of people, since August of 2026. And that matters more than the job count. The employment rate strips out a lot of the population growth effects. It tells you how much of the country is actually working, and that ratio just fell. And this is how labor markets crack quietly without people realizing, not with layoffs everywhere, not with the unemployment rate jumping, but with fewer people even contributing to the labor force at all. So at the same time, the unemployment rate actually fell to 6.5%. This is a bit of an optical illusion, right? The unemployment rate dropped 30 basis points, not because we were seeing more people get hired, because 94,000 people stopped looking for work. This means your labor force participation rate, the number of people looking for jobs, fell sharply, especially in Ontario. A lot of this could be temporary foreign workers leaving Canada. People leaving the labor force makes unemployment look better, but it also makes the economy weaker. It can keep the unemployment rate up. And this aligns with a lot of the policy-driven population shifts, fewer temporary foreign workers, fewer international students staying, less inflow at the margin. If anything, we're seeing outflow. So we're losing jobs and we're losing job seekers at the same time. And so your unemployment rate doesn't look as alarming as it should, probably, given the setup that we're looking at economically from what I can see. Now, manufacturing is down 28,000 jobs. Education services are down 24,000. Public administration is down 10,000. Private sector employment fell by 52,000 jobs. Meanwhile, job growth showed up in areas tied to government spending. Now we're seeing growth in CapEx spending, infrastructure, utilities, business support linked to public projects. And this fits the broader macro picture that we know Carney is running a record deficit, and a lot of that is going to CapEx. We have trade uncertainty, we have economic contraction, we have the government pulling back on operating expenses, with thousands of people in the Canadian public service receiving layoff notices, as well as public sector unions saying nearly 10,000 employees got layoff notices this week, and federal public servants being called back to the office 4 days a week starting this summer. So I would argue that we are actually seeing a reduction in OpEx, which is your operating expenses, but we're still spending on capital projects. And so you're going to see employment growth and GDP growth from the government spending all of that money. But when you're seeing a decrease in private sector and an increase in public sector, when the private sector pauses and the public sector props things up, that's not expansion. At least it's not really a real economic expansion, because governments spend from deficits, and that's money that later needs to be paid back by the tax base. And so you're sort of borrowing from future growth with interest when you do things that way. It's worked historically for many economies when they can grow enough to pay back the previous deficits, or maybe it hasn't. I don't really know of any government who has stopped going into debt, right? I think most of these governments who issue their own currency believe in modern monetary theory, basically, where any of that money that they're putting into the economy basically becomes private savings or private wealth. I'm not saying that's what I believe, but it seems like that's what they believe. Now, Ontario's are really the big pressure point here. Ontario lost 67,000 jobs in 1 month. Okay. Participation fell a full percentage point. And we know Ontario has a high concentration of temporary foreign workers, international students, yet unemployment is at 7.3%. This is ground zero for what's happening nationally. Jobs are disappearing. People are stepping back. Numbers are still improving on paper, right? Our unemployment rate didn't get worse in Ontario. It actually got better. Now, at this point, we understand where and why jobs are being lost. Trade friction, slowing growth. I'm not even going to allow anyone to blame trade exclusively, because I think that most of the economic problems that we're seeing right now would have happened regardless of if the trade war took place. I think they probably got a little bit exacerbated there. But I still think that this counter cycle is something we would have gone through regardless of what happened with the US election and the relationship between the US. But I found it interesting, like the Bank of Canada put this chart in there. Tiff Macklem did his speech here called Structural Change, Canada at a Crossroads, which I would encourage people to watch if they get a chance. But I'm also going to do a video on a couple of things that stood out for me there. But the one chart that really stood out to me in the report was that the job finding rate had fallen much more in occupations that are exposed to artificial intelligence. And we know why some jobs still exist: infrastructure spending, CapEx, heavy building projects. But there's the one thing that seems to be completely missing, at least from Statistics Canada's reporting on this, and that's AI, right? And I haven't seen, there's almost no discussion of AI-related job displacement in Statistics Canada's labor force surveys. But that doesn't mean it's not happening. It probably just means that it's hard to measure in real time. And I know a lot of people who watch my channel have asked me to talk about this in the comments, and I appreciate that. And I do really make an effort to read and respond to all my comments. So keep them coming, please. But yeah, I do think that AI will cause job losses on the front end. Every major technological shift does that. At one point, roughly a quarter of the US economy revolved around firewood. No joke. If you want to read more about this, you can check out the paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research. It says firewood in the American economy, 1700 to 2010, where it's got a pretty self-explanatory chart here that says consumption of fuel wood, and it shows it falling off of a cliff over time. Who would have thought, right? Similar things happened in farming, right? The world moved from 80% of people working in farming agriculture to barely 1% in agriculture in the 21st century. Today, it's barely 1%. The same pattern keeps repeating: short-term disruption, long-term productivity gains. Technology always looks destructive up close, but it's actually really bullish from far away. And the reason I'm talking about this now is because Tiff Macklem mentioned it and observed it here, but also McKinsey put out this report that I've been wanting to talk a little bit about. And also, like, this is pretty near and dear to me and the work that I do. It basically just shows sort of like sectors and career types that are most exposed. And it shows the 2/3 of US work requires only non-physical capabilities. And it ranks by physical and non-physical. Non-physical work being things that can easily be replaced by a computer. And so I sort of looked at this and said, like, what does my job do? A lot of office and administrative report, mostly non-physical. A lot of sales and related. Probably just a combination of those two things, to be honest. And so I'm pretty narrow in my scope, right? I don't pretend to understand how every industry works, but I do work at a company called Valerie.ca, which is Canada's first AI-powered real estate brokerage. You can check it out in the description if you want to go basically as far as you possibly can without having to engage the services of a realtor. It's a good place for you to check out. And so working in the AI space, especially in the real estate space, which is, I would say, quite vulnerable to AI, I see this shift up close. And if you've watched my channel for a while, you'll know I'm like really big on transparency. That's kind of the reason I do this stuff. Transparency in real estate data is really important to me, but also I think we're kind of getting to the point where a lot of industries are being rethought, right? And we're sort of getting like, the opening of the kimono on a lot of industries. And it's like, we now know what jobs are done. Actually, a founder of a really cool AI company in Canada called May kind of tipped me off to this thing, the Compass S1 filing, which actually like goes through every single job to be done. Let's call it like every single step of what a realtor does. And so I think like, people get the job of real estate a lot more than they did before. It was very mystified. The industry is built on information asymmetry. Real estate boards hold all the info. The consumer doesn't have as much. And you start to get things like, House Sigma breaking down that barrier, giving valuation, giving sold data, et cetera. The lawsuit from Zoocasa against the Toronto Real Estate Board, which catalyzed a lot of that. Anyway, we've sort of open sourced what we're doing at Valerie in a school group, school.com/agent, but cleverly spelled AI-gent, but we just say it agent, which I'll put a link in the show notes. And we have a bunch of courses on real estate professionals for real estate professionals on how to use AI to level up their business, right? So we taught people how to use Claude Cowork to do things like book showings, et cetera. I'm big on OpenClaw, formerly known as Moltbot and ClaudeBot, and we're working a lot on building out functionally a realtor that can do everything other than show properties. So if you're a realtor watching this, you can literally build our entire stack yourself. You're not going to want to once you've seen how much work goes into it. And that's kind of the funny part, right? Like for me, teaching people how to do this is actually it's basically like a top of funnel to get people to purchase a SaaS from us, like a product. Most people you'll say, hey, here's how you do it. And then they see like that it's 2 weeks worth of work and they're like, okay, yeah, like how much can I pay to do it for me? We have bots doing CMAs, comparative market analysis, which I'll put a link in the show notes and you can tell me if you think it can do as good of a job as a human being can. Like, that's kind of the joke with like Zestimate or House Sigma, right? We have Claude Cowork booking showings, OpenClaw booking showings, drafting offers, eliminating the busy work of being an agent. And on that note of transparency, one of the things that I want to start doing is breaking all of this down publicly for consumers so that you understand how AI is reshaping industries, but also for realtors so that you can work faster, so that you can do your job better, so that you can be more efficient and deliver better results and probably be cheaper and charge lower fees and still make the same amount of money. Because at the end of the day, innovation, like especially AI, innovation is typically deflationary. Anyway, if you want to follow that series, I'm going to be doing it on this YouTube channel. Hopefully it fits. I don't know. ChatGPT told me it kind of fit. And I think it does and it will. So I'm just going to like basically go through a bunch of different techs and show you how much time they're going to alleviate from the real estate profession. And I think that this will really start telling people the story and sort of showing the arc of how we're progressing towards fee compression and deflationary innovation in the real estate space and a much different real estate market. Like, I think conservatively, the real estate industry will be completely unrecognizable in 5 years. But at the rate technology is advancing, I could see it happening even faster than that. Anyway, if you're a real estate professional or just like someone who's into this stuff, join the school group. Links in the description. Anyway, here's the real story from the January jobs report. The labor market's weakening. Private sector hiring is under pressure. Ontario's feeling it first. The unemployment rate looks better, but for the wrong reasons. And the next big labor shift, AI-driven productivity, is barely showing up in official data yet. The Bank of Canada just observed it for the first time. I think this is the first time I've sort of seen a government observe AI in relation to employment, not tech spending or infrastructure growth or whatever. But this is one of those things that I'm going to start focusing on a lot more. How work is changing, especially in my industry, just because it's what I know. I don't know other industries and I don't want to pretend to, because I just think it's stupid when people go to scope, especially me, honestly. I just sound like an idiot when I try and talk about stuff I don't know what I'm talking about. But I want to look at how work is changing, who wins, who adapts, and how consumers should think about this stuff. So before we wrap it up, subscribe if you want honest breakdowns of macro, housing, and now technology and AI. I try and put as little hype into these things as possible, just pure data and context. And let me leave you with a question, as I always try to, for the comments. Do you think that realtors can be replaced by AI? Would you buy a house without a realtor if you could do it with an AI on your phone or on your computer? Let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, thanks a lot for taking time to watch this video. I'll see you again as soon as I can.